All right, the meeting is called to order. Welcome, everybody. It's been a long time since we've met here this evening, since we've met, period. Lindsay, you're calling the roll this evening, please?
Chairperson Philip Goldstein,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jost, Commissioner Tom Wood,
Here.
Commissioner Wendy Newland, Commissioner Michael Lowry, Alternate Commissioner Renzo Bianchi,
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Janelle Mines. Here.
Thank you. Commissioners, any amendments to the agenda? Alternates, both of you will obviously vote this evening. Public comment, this is general public comment. There will also be public comment on, well, we will have public comment on both items because we're allowing public comment on site plans. So, but this is a time for comment on anything that is not on the agenda. Is there anybody signed up to speak on anything not on the agenda, knowing there will be public comment on our two business items? No, hearing none, I presume. Okay, we'll move on. Consent agenda, Commissioners, consists solely of the approval of the December 2nd, 2025 meeting minutes. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
To approve?
To approve.
Yes, so, all right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda carries on a 4-0 vote. Updates, 3 that I put on there and 1 that Commissioner Bianchi put on there. The land use code amendments on gated communities and landscaping that came by us quite some time ago, probably a month and a half ago. And staff helped me with this. On the gated communities, we did pass an amendment to the land use code prohibiting gated communities. We did it tag on, if you recall, when we discussed it, that private properties could be gated, and that did pass through council.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And then on the landscaping, the main concern was the state mandated provisions about conservation and what was the expression, non-functional turf uses. We had tagged on, again, using that expression, we had tagged on something about turf, recreational turf, and council passed on, I should say passed on passing it, deferred on that pending further study, which staff is doing, and all will be part of what you're going to see in the coming weeks, a lot of land use code amendments dealing with conservation. Scott, you had something else?
That's a very accurate summary, and thank you for jogging my memory because I couldn't remember what happened. But yeah, town council did approve the landscaping per the state code requirements, but kind of punted a little bit on doing more research on some of the landscape materials like Tahoma 13 and other things. So we're still researching those and bringing them forward. A lot of that came about kind of some concerns with Parks Department and coordinating on parks, and so we've been coordinating with parks on that.
Thanks. Timnath Landings, just to let you know, the final plat had advanced with no issues, as I recall, past council.
It has passed council, and we're in the process of doing our due diligence with signatures and getting various things put together. It has not yet been recorded, but we're in the process of that.
And White Wing, which was considered at last week's town council meeting, council stood firm, I think it's safe to say, on the fact that the comprehensive plan in their minds many provisions of the comprehensive plan, many sections of the comprehensive plan. They felt a gated community ran counter to some of that inclusivity, accessibility, and a few others. So they did advance it with 3 conditions. One is the normal, allow staff to work with for non-substantive issues. That there would be, the developer came back with a, I would say substantially modified proposal, moved the open space, created open space differently in a different place, and removed a wall. I think it was categorized as a wall or a fence, moved that, and the trails were not an issue given some changes in that. But the big one as far as council is concerned, even though he was going to make the gates open all day and closed at dusk to dawn, council made it clear that they were not in favor of gates anywhere. And then there was a third condition that had to do with the ditch company, which I never did understand. If you care to explain it or not briefly, that's.
Yeah, again, thanks for the summary. Really, the basis of that is the developer and the ditch company still need to agree on some of the changes that were part of the plat, and those will be resolved by final plat. So they're just working out some of the details on the rerouting of the irrigation ditch through that site.
Thanks. And lastly, Renzo added it this evening. Go ahead and ask about.
No, I
question.
noticed the plot of land behind the, right here to our east, that originally was going to have the apartments on it. What's the status on that? I noticed that they moved all their stuff out.
Great question. I actually reached out to them to let them know that they cannot use that as an outdoor storage facility, so they were very good in complying with our request as part of our code, and so they did move those materials off-site. They are still in process of moving that project forward. If you recall, site plans have a 2-year lifespan or shelf life, so they're still within that perspective. They actually reached out to our building department, running some estimates right now, so that project seems to be moving forward. Great timing, because if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I probably wouldn't have any updates.
Commissioners, anything else to add to the update list? Thank you. Okay, we move on to business. First item, business 7A, Kitchell Lake Clubhouse. That's Troy.
Good evening. Advance the slides here. This is a site plan approval coming before you tonight. The applicant is with the TB Group, Kristen Turner, and the owners Kitchell Lake F3 Development Corporation. Site plan process is here's the. You're also familiar, I assume, with this, but we've got our little matrix of the process and what the decisions are and what notifications are necessary for site plan review. Planning Commission is the final decision maker unless it had more than one building, and this only has one building, so you guys are deciding here tonight. This is also, and I'll get into a few little diagrams, but this is consistent with the sketch plan that was approved for this development, Saratoga third filing, and also consistent with the final plat of the Saratoga third filing. Subject property is kind of on the southwest end of Kitchell Lake. And, let me just back. So it's from a comp plan standpoint, low density residential is the majority of the Saratoga Falls neighborhood, and this is within that. The zoning is in R2, which is the zoning associated with that low density residential designation on the comp plan. aerial photo. It's just, currently there's houses across the street and sort of, across two of the streets, but there still are a lot of, undeveloped, or unbuilt, existing lots that have been platted with the third filing. The amended sketch plan is, that was amended back in 2021 for the third filing is kind of the, most recent sketch plan that applies. And you can see there were 3 green areas designated as, park, and, other amenities for the whole neighborhood. This is the one on the west end of those 3. And then the zoom in within the sketch plan, shows kind of the anticipated things within that space, and this is consistent with that. This is kind of a glimpse of the Saratoga Falls third filing final plat, and it shows this as a tract that was intended for this kind of future community use. I'm just showing briefly, and I know the applicant's got a presentation and they can kind of go through these details, but they've got a building that's compatible with the architecture in the neighborhood. We've worked out the landscaping and the site plan, and it's pretty straightforward, but it's a fairly small clubhouse building and a pretty good sized swimming pool with quite a bit of buffery landscaping to kind of help the most nearby residents from any impacts. One of the big issues, well, I wouldn't call it so much an issue, but it's a noteworthy consideration is how did we come up with the adequate number of parking? Our table 5.6 in our land use code talks an awful lot about very specific parking ratios that are required. But in looking at that table, I really didn't see a use that was comparable. At first we were talking about, and I know some of the other pools in town have used a ratio that was based on the square footage of the clubhouse building. And in this case, the clubhouse building is so small and the pool is pretty substantial that it didn't seem like basing the number of parking on the building itself made a whole lot of sense. And so this 5.8.9 section of the land use code talks about when the table doesn't seem to have a very comparable use, then we can do a parking determination through administrative review, which basically they did a comparison of some other parking at the pools and elsewhere in town. So there's the Summerfields Parkway pool in the south end of town, and then there's the John Moore Drive at the Trailside development as well. So they looked at those. There's a lot of overlap, but there's also some unique things happening. But we really, from a staff level, thought we didn't want to try to have too large of a parking lot, and they do have a lot of on-street parking available, and so the 19 parking lot spaces that they have, plus the 24 nearby on-street spaces, seemed to us from a staff level to be adequate, particularly as they pointed out the 2 examples and what the parking space on and off street at those 2 facilities have as well. We can come back to that if you have any questions on that, and I think the applicant might want to speak to that as well if you have any questions on that. But here's the actual site plan drawing, and it really shows kind of some of the amenities. They're going to have a beach front with a dock, and that's sort of the kind of the public park end of the use, and then they're going to have a pool area that's got a security fence around it, but then also this kind of parking lot that helps serve when they're the users when they arrive on the facility. And like I said, there's also some on-street parking. There's plentiful because there's so much street frontage on this Pritchard Street right across. That doesn't have any houses fronting directly across the street. You got the side of one house, but otherwise Pritchard Street has quite a bit of on-street parking available. And with that, I just wanted to briefly go through, we did review from a staff level the review criteria that site plans need to adhere to, and this was very clearly compliant with those review criteria. Applies with the zone district. The architecture and the building are really compatible with the residential architecture of the neighborhood. The utilities that are being provided are adequate, and so forth. I can go through if you have any specific questions. The analysis is in the staff report as well as in the PowerPoint, but it seems like a good project, and it would fit well in the neighborhood. With that, I think I'd like to recommend the motion with the standard condition that to allow staff or to approve this site plan with the standard condition to allow staff to work with the applicant on minor modifications prior to final signatures. And should we turn it over to the applicant, or you want
Yes,
to?
let's stick with our normal
Okay.
protocol here. So, Ms. Turner?
Okay. Oh, I can hear myself now. Well, thanks for the time tonight. We really appreciate it. We will only take a few minutes of your time, but then I'll be available to answer any questions that you might have. We do have our team here tonight as well, so depending on what kind of questions you have, we've hopefully got the person to answer it. All right. So let's start with just getting oriented with the site. This is the overall Kitchell subdivision. As you can see, we put a little red squiggly line around the site for you. The pool and clubhouse were always an amenity that were envisioned as part of the Kitchell community, and it's located on the northeast corner of Pritchard Street and Gianna Drive. It's directly adjacent to Kitchell Lake, and it's approximately 2 acres. So this is our site plan for you. It includes a pool right in the middle, as you'll see, a clubhouse. We do have some shade sail areas over by the baby pool, so that's on sort of that northern portion of the site. It includes pool deck areas, so we'll have some hardscape, but we'll also have some softscape areas for people within the fenced area. So grassy areas, people can choose what kind of surfacing they want to lie on or hang out on. There is a sand beach proposed as well with access to the lake and a dock. So you see that tan area right adjacent to the lake. Will be bringing in sand to turn it into a sandier beach than it already is right now. And then there will be a floating dock that will give folks access out to the lake as well. The clubhouse building is also going to include a locked area for the residents. So if you look at the dark blue building, and then on the north side of it, you see sort of a smaller rectangle there, that is going to be a locked area for stand-up paddle boards. So residents of the community will be able to store their paddle boards there, have like a key fob or something like that to access it, and then they can take it directly down to the lake, so they won't have to be moving them back and forth across the neighborhood. You'll notice that there's landscaping that's all the way around the pool to help provide some privacy and some visual interest, obviously. We've also bumped up the landscaping and added some more evergreen type landscaping along the southern portion of the pool fencing and then out into the open areas between the parking lot and that future residential lot that will develop as well. We do have part of the community trail system that runs along the lake edge in this location as well. So that is a larger connector through the overall subdivision. So we're providing a connection from the pool, from Pritchard Street out to that trail system, which is going to help people access the site a little bit easier as well. So we've got options to access via vehicles, bicycles, or walking. We are providing 19 parking spaces, and we have 12 bike parking spaces as well, assuming that this is going to be heavily trafficked by families on their bikes and people that are walking to the site. The pool is just under 6,000 square feet, and the building is just under 2,000 square feet. Here are a couple of images of the pool building for you, just so you can get an idea of what's being proposed. And that'll take us back to our site plan. So the plan is in conformance with the town's land use code and master plans, as well as the final approved third filing plat. It is a development that we're pretty excited about. We've been working on Kitchell Lake for many years now. It's been really fun to watch the subdivision come to life and to see it be built out. I know that this is an amenity that folks that live out there have been waiting for and are anxious to see, so we're excited to bring it forward. And we are respectfully requesting approval of the site plan tonight. If you've got any questions for me, that's all I've got for you.
Okay, first we're going to open it to public comment. Is there anybody signed up or otherwise wishes to offer? We do have
Yes,
distinguished guest who wishes to offer public comment. So you have 3 minutes, sir. And could you state your name and address, please?
I sure can. Jeremy Holt, 1346 Alyssa Drive, just down the street here in Timnath. I'm here more to share as a resident. It's different being on this side of the table, but my excitement and slight concern with the project. We live just down the road on Alyssa. I think the design is super appealing. I think the clubhouse leaves a little bit to be desired from what was originally promised, just due to size and community gathering space. And then also, I think there was, you always get it into a scenario of what the builder tells you versus the plans you see versus what actually comes to Planning Commission and what ends up happening. You know, we were told parks, gathering area, places for kids to play. And my concern is, in even looking at the map above, to the area between the kind of the fence and the pool and the beach seems to be the more natural grass. I could be wrong, but where my concern lies is it's a beautiful neighborhood. We love it. The homes are built well, but the maintenance and ongoing upkeep in the common spaces leaves more than to be desired. The overwhelming use of natural grass that has taken many, many years to grow, period, if not just an abundance of weeds. So my concern is that maintenance, and when residents call to inquire about or get things fixed, goes on deaf ears. You call your builder for a warranty issue, they answer in 24 hours. You call the consulting group, they might not ever get back to you unless 10 people call and there's an email. So I think the building will be built. I think the pool will be there. I'm concerned of who's going to maintain it, because the maintenance seems to get a buck passing between Bath and, you know, from the developer, I've heard things like, well, we inherited a problem, so it's going to be a problem and you're going to have to deal with it until we fix it. And I think this is a multi-million-dollar project that in theory will look very well in the beginning, but if it's not maintained as just like other parts of the neighborhood, it's just going to be an expensive building that goes by the wayside. And from my experience, things are getting dropped on the developer side. It seems to be, let's remove as many trees, let's get the lot sold and move on. Things from not having mailboxes out for new parts of the neighborhood and having residents go months without actually having an address and be able to receive mail. Just simple things that the developer should be up on. Just making sure that if this project is done and complete, it looks beautiful. As a resident, I'm excited. I'm just concerned on who's going to maintain it and make sure that this thing stays as this nice long-term, because I would assume an assessment's probably going to come to the residents. And we're going to be on the hook for the maintenance long-term once the developer is up and out of there. And speaking on behalf of many residents, not what we signed up for. Other than that, I think the project looks awesome. The pool's huge. My kids will love it. I just hope it stays that way and it stays maintained for a long time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. I presume we have nobody else signed up or otherwise wishes to speak on this item. All right, we're going to bring it up here. Commissioners, your thoughts first, and I've got several myself. Tom.
Yeah, I appreciate Jeremy's comments. I'm lucky enough to sit on a Metro District Board and HOA, and
and they are suffering from a lack of funding for maintenance more than anything else. And one of the things that I noticed with this pool, and I'm very familiar with the similar pool off of Summerfields, we've had a huge issue with the trench drains that you show here and where they cross between the kiddie pool and the main pool. We've had issues with those trench drains leaking into the subsoil, freeze thaw, cracking of the concrete deck all around. I don't think we're in a position to suggest how you might re-engineer it, but that is a recipe for failure, and we've seen that same failure over at the Summerfield pool because of the high clay soils. They soak up moisture, and freeze thaw is significant, and that trench drain between the two is exactly where it's likely to fail. So I think you might want to look at that, because long-term reserve analysis and asset management planning, it's hard to get enough money to fix those concrete decks once they fail. So that was my biggest concern as I saw it. I don't know how the pool is being constructed. It's not part of the package. I'm assuming it's a reinforced concrete pool, but the drainage around it and soils and geotechnical issues are significant in this area, and I suspect you're going to have the same problems there. Those are my comments, Phil.
Thanks. I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. Kristen, you're taking notes, I assume. We can appreciate your thoughts on this. Commissioners, Renzo. Put your mic on. Get on the mic.
Sorry, one of my questions was with regards to, he mentioned with regards to maintenance. Is the city on the hook, or is this all HOA/Metro District that does it? And the reason why I'm asking is, one of the notes I read, it says that this is private and it's only for that.
Kristen, why don't you come up to the mic and so we can answer these as we go along, and then we'll have a few more, and bring Justin, if you have in a minute thoughts on Tom's question as well. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, okay.
You got the question right? Pardon?
Oops, sorry, I'm off. There is a metro district for this community, so they would be responsible for the maintenance, not the city or the
All
town.
right, and since you're up there, if I may ask my second question too. When I look at the site plan, it was hard for me to tell. I've got the large dotted line of the track. Is that fencing, or is that just meant to depict the track itself? I couldn't tell from the plan.
So the black line that goes, so everything that's in brighter color, that's just the tract for this development. The fencing, you'll see landscape around the fencing, so you can kind of use the pool deck as your edge plus that brighter green
Okay.
closer to the lake. That's where the fencing is.
So reason why I asked that is that parking lot would be available 24/7. There's nothing restricting people.
Correct.
Okay, that was the one thing. And then, again, my other question touches on what he brought up. Beautiful design. However, it looks like from the design, I would have to walk all the way around the pool to get access to the beach, as opposed to having an access from the pool area or on the right-hand side. Is that correct?
That is correct. So the sidewalk, we're providing a sidewalk connection on the north side of this tract to get to the beach area and to the trail back there. We do have a drainage swale, so that more olivey green is a drainage swale that runs through there. So we are proposing native grasses in that area. So we don't want folks walking through the bottom of that. And it kind of curves around the edge of the site. We also didn't want to take neighborhood traffic between the pool, the fenced portion of the pool, and those closest lots that are located right there. So we're just making the access direct from the street. If folks want to head to the beach, we keep the pool deck controlled. So there's a fence up, and then there's controlled locations for the gates. We don't want gates like at the back of the pool deck, for example, so that we don't have people coming in and out when they shouldn't be, or making sure that it's supervised properly.
And my final question, then, since you answered that, I do have to walk around, about safety. So I see Pritchard Street right there. Is there a sidewalk that they would walk on, or do they have to walk on the street to get to that, what it looks like is the only access to the beach?
There's detached sidewalks along both Gianna and Pritchard, so you can be on a sidewalk with a tree lawn and the trees between you and the street. Nobody will need to walk on the street.
Thank you.
You bet.
Janelle?
So can we look at the landscaping plan? So I guess my question is in regards to the public comment with the olive green area, is that going to be native grasses?
Yes.
And then how long will they be irrigated before the irrigation is done?
So native grass is always listed as to be graded or to be irrigated as long as it takes to get it established. And native seed is, the reality is it's tricky, and it's a lot of times both the installers and sometimes folks that live in neighborhoods don't understand that native grasses will take longer than, for example, like a turf grass lawn to get established. There's plenty of people that do understand that as well, but sometimes there's an expectation that there'll be like an instantaneous landscape that looks just right. So it's not uncommon for native seeded areas to take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to get established. There is that period includes a lot of weeding to give the native seed a chance to go to seed and sort of fill the space appropriately. And then there's also a maintenance component of it, and that's another tricky piece of like constantly trying to make sure that your landscape crews are aware of the proper way to maintain those landscapes. So for example, we don't want people to come in and mow a native seeded area on a weekly basis. We actually only want it to be mown twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring, and it allows it to go to seed, and that helps to spread the grass and, you know, establish the area even better. So there are some things like that that are kind of overall in the industry, things that everybody still struggles with, of kind of conveying that information of the best way to take care of this landscape, the fastest way to get it from seed to establishment. We'll find in certain communities, there'll be mandates from the city or the jurisdiction on, what they think might be the best way. And some sites are easier to establish, some sites are harder to establish. So it does involve reseeding sometimes. So there are steps to it. But I guess my point is, when you're dealing with native seed, it's typically a process that can take multiple years and can be impacted by the seasons that we're in. So if we're in a drought season or in a really wet season, those can all play into how quickly they establish and are successful.
So then maybe my question goes to Troy then. Are there Timnath guidelines on how to establish this? Is there going to be a established timeline?
We've been working with that concept on another project that has a lot of native grasses. In this case, what they've proposed, we really haven't commented on it. It is like she says, common for it to be 3 to 5 years, and weeding while it's being established is a very important piece of the puzzle. That detail, I guess, was one of the things that we're intending to finalize in these, the condition of approval, where we're working out those minor follow-up details. But on this project, we haven't gone into a lot of detail on that, other than Timnath doesn't have a lot of guidance in the codes about that.
Okay. So I guess I just have that as a concern as well, because I've seen other developments where the developer says, oh, too bad it was a dry year, we're out of here, and the grass never grows. So I just wanted to put that forth as something that maybe that could be included in the land use code as we go forward.
So I don't like to use a hammer, but we always have the enforcement piece. So if you recall, we did update our municipal code and our land use code requiring some enforcement provisions. So if it came to the point where this place was in serious neglect, then the town would have the opportunity to inform the Metro District that they're not keeping the site up to standards, and they could be fined if they don't mitigate those problems. Now, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but weeds is a complicated topic. which we are dealing with soon. Typically, when a building gets its CO, certificate of occupancy, staff will go out and inspect the landscaping. So the things that we'll inspect are the trees and the bushes and the whatever, but the natural areas take a long time to establish, and we see it take well in some parts of a subdivision and not well in others. We have them go out and reseed. So we often work with the developers on some of those strategies over time. So it's a work in progress. Another thing that we're having to deal with is the wildland fire code that the state adopted, and so there's hardening zones that we have to look at, and residents often get concerned about native grass and concerns with wildfire. There's been mixed signals from residents about wanting their metro districts to go out and mow when they're trying to establish that. Then, so it takes a lot of communication and education with these native grasses to get established and what the expectations are of the town and the communities of the benefits that they bring, low water use, and kind of some aesthetics to the area with that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I think, so then as residents, their recourse then is to go to the town and say, we're concerned about this area not being established, and that's basically what they would do.
As a last resort, yeah, that's where we're at. But with, like in this instance, a site plan, again, we would inspect for the landscaping to be installed, but the native turf is always a challenging one to sign off on that.
One other point to make is the developer needs to provide a letter of credit or a bond or some sort of surety for the landscape improvements before, and we, as town staff, will inspect that it's all installed and established prior to releasing the full amount of the surety that guarantees the landscape improvements to be installed. So they have a motivation to do it right because we're holding their money and won't return it until we sign off on it.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
I've got one more thing to add as well, if it's helpful to the conversation.
Yes.
So this is actually a water quality pond for a larger portion of the subdivision. So this portion of it is already built, and the seeding has started. So it will be ahead of the rest of the development of this tract in terms of getting the native established because it's already underway. So it just saves a little bit of time, right? If everything was being built at one time versus we already have some of that time being taken to establish seed, and the pool and the clubhouse will come behind that.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so different question. The number of parking spaces, I was surprised that it wasn't in the code, that there was some kind of formula on this. Is that something that the town is working on being able to codify or represent? Because this is hopefully not going to be the last clubhouse pool that gets built in Timnath.
That hasn't been on our radar screen to do a code amendment for that, but it might not be a bad idea to try to clarify that in an upcoming code amendment.
Death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah. Big picture is we intend to kind of repeal and replace our land use code because we're constantly updating them. We're considering some more amendments tonight. So there are some structural things that, like, how do you define a clubhouse pool versus a clubhouse and parking? So there's things like that we could bring forward if we see a need on the number of requests that we're getting. Some of the things that you'll hear later are related to state legislation that kind of pushes that forward, but the big picture is hopefully we'll have an opportunity to kind of start fresh with a new code that hopefully will capture some of these things, but certainly consider it. We always want to keep it relevant and up to date.
Right, and I think it depends on what amenities you have. Like if you have a pickleball court next to a pool, that's going to have different people using it at different, how long they want to park there, right? So with that parking to the beach access, you mentioned that people, if they wanted to get to the beach, they would park on street, is that right?
They could use the parking lot or they could park on street.
Okay. Is there any other way to access this beach besides around this clubhouse?
So there are 2 other park locations that are planned along Kitchell Lake as well, farther to the east. Those haven't been developed yet. So I would anticipate that, I think the trail runs all the way around the lake in those areas. I would anticipate that there'll be access in those locations as well. We just haven't gotten to that the design of those areas yet.
Okay. And then with the clubhouse, so what is inside the clubhouse?
It's primarily locker rooms, lifeguard space, storage areas, and then the outdoor component is the stand-up paddleboard storage.
Okay. Okay, so there is no gathering, there's no meeting rooms or anything like that in there?
No, it's really intended to be a smaller building to serve the pool, and just make sure that folks have a place to lock up their stuff when they go swimming and change, and the guards have a place to be in the shade.
Okay, all right. That's all my questions. Thank you.
I have a number of things, but can we, I'd like to have Tom's main point, have you address that, if you can understand it.
I do,
'Cause
and I am
I'm
not your
sure I
person
do,
for that.
but he
Amanda
does,
is
and
that.
that's what's important. So could we address that, please?
I'm Amanda Poinslot with EPS Group. I'm the civil engineer on this. You mentioned the trench drains at another pool were not working?
Right, they've
or-
had some issues at the Summerfield pool where the bridge deck is cracking, differential settlements occurring, and it appears to be associated with the drainage systems, trench drains, similar to what you've got proposed here, where additional moisture has gone into the trench, freeze-thaw actions within those areas have seen increased settlement or increased differential cracking in the bridge, in the pool decks around those areas. Also around the edge where you have grasses shown along that far edge is a different place to lay. They're in the process of ripping out all that grass, and they're not going to have it because of the challenges with moisture getting in under the bridge, under the pool decks, and the pool decks starting to heave.
Okay, do you happen to know if that's a PVC system for the trench drain, or is it a concrete line trench drain?
It is a PVC trench drain, and it appears that the PVC has failed over the years in that moisture was retained, it froze in the wintertime, and cracked the PVC, which is now leaking.
I think something that we could consider is doing more of a concrete line trench drain, because then you're not going to have those seals where the water is actually going to leak into the ground and then upheave the concrete.
I think in hindsight, if they had gone with just a valley pan gutter across the top and not any subsurface drainage, it would have been preferred.
I did try that on this design. Unfortunately, with pool decks, they like to see about a 1% slope kind of throughout.
Not in the fall.
Unfortunately, yeah, it creates a little bit of issues with grading right around the pool. So the trench drain allows for that water, as you know, to go underground and kind of go across. But I think something more of a concrete lined trench drain would be appropriate so that it isn't having seepage through the PVC and concrete, and that would potentially be helpful versus the
Relook at the
PVC
high
system.
point and try to drain in other directions away from the pool surface. That might be
Yes.
another option.
Yeah, one of our biggest constraints is Pritchard Street. So we're coming up at a 5%, which is kind of that ADA maximum to the building, and having that flow away. So once you get to that high point, the building itself can only do so much. And then we're also constrained by the water quality pond that's existing right there. There's a flared end section on the northwest corner, and kind of tying back into that, we have to keep a 4-to-1 slope. And so we're already lifting the building high enough that that's getting a little difficult. So we have maxed out on grades kind of there as well.
Not an easy problem.
It is not,
I sympathize with you.
unfortunately, it is not. I think to kind of help with that concrete upheaval, I think that we can look at the geotech report. They always recommend kind of over excavating so that the soils aren't all clay. And then I would say more of a concrete line trench would be something that we could do.
Another thought, most of the metro districts will have a reserve fund and allow for funding, 25, 30 years down the road, they're going to have enough money to go fix the concrete deck around the pool. The challenge we have in other metro districts is we don't have any reserves, and we don't have enough money to fix that deck, which means they're going to have to close the pool at some point in the future. I would strongly encourage a minimum percentage of reserves be held to fix pool-related issues when and if they happen.
Perfect, we will. Thank you.
And it's a lot of money.
Okay, my turn. You know, commissioners, we are primarily a recommending body, but when it comes to a site plan, the buck stops with us. Unfortunately, not everything is within our purview like it is with the first team, town council. But this won't go to town council, so I think it's important to get on the record. I too have heard some of the concerns that Mr. Holt expressed without going out and talking to people, which we're not allowed to do, but heard in a completely different context at a council meeting not long ago, heard some concerns expressed. Things about the native grasses, things about the maintenance in general. So I think it behooves us to have as many of these things addressed as possible. I heard the word consider, and that gives me pause when we hear that. But again, we don't have, certain things are not within our purview. I'm glad to hear Community Development Director Robinson mention enforcement. I think it certainly behooves that there be enforcement if the native grasses are not coming along, notwithstanding that they do take longer to get going. Now, that's the not so good news. That's the bad news. The good news is Kristen Turner's involved in this, and we go back quite a ways. She's been making presentations almost as long as I've been on Planning Commission. And one thing I've learned, she is very diligent in conveying these concerns up the chain. And I think when you hear a council member like Mr. Holt coming here, taking the time to come to a Planning Commission meeting, it certainly would behoove you and your team to take these things very seriously. I think my colleague here, when you hear about the drain issue, is it a trench or a French drain?
It's a trench.
A trench drain.
Trench with a
Okay.
pipe in it.
I think that certainly goes beyond the categorization of concern, and it would be something to move to the front burner. The landscaping issues, again, I'm particularly concerned, and again, I don't know, this is, I shouldn't say I don't know, I know it's not entirely within our purview, that this is not the same as what was originally presented to us some years ago. And I realize the change in ownership and such, I've learned, because my very first meeting as chair was when Saratoga Falls was rescued from previous ownership. So I understand things can change if they're legally allowed to change. So I can understand it, but it is concerning, nevertheless, that this is not in size and scope necessarily what was promised to us, and that predates, you may have been on that point, even before you, what we knew, what we were told was coming for the residents. With that said, I think the beach is a nice addition to this, and it can still turn out to be a nice project. On the parking issue, I think the better answer, staff, is yes when it comes to Janelle's question about will we be developing standards, although I know projects like this don't come along very often. The last one we had was the Trailside. And I don't recall that we didn't have standards, but I do think because we went to great lengths, the fact that there was a pool and a very modest clubhouse and pickleball courts and kind of a park area, I believe 19 spaces with spaces on the street are sufficient for this. This is located, the lake notwithstanding, this is located as about as centrally as it can be, so I think many people will choose to walk or bike to this. So I'm not terribly concerned if you all aren't about the parking standards, but I do think we should look at having some firm standard on this. But I understand, Troy and Scott, I understand the difficulty that this doesn't fit nicely like some other things do.
Just one thing on that. I know in the past, some of the other pools had a closer ratio of pool size to building size, and they in the code, the previous planners that were assigned to that kind of honed in on, and I forget the exact use, but it was a use that was based on the square footage of the building. In this case, because the pool is, you know, it's a pool large enough to have swimming lanes and like swim meets and that sort of thing. Just seemed like the pool had a higher piece of the puzzle on the demand for the parking, that wasn't a good, you know, something that's based on the square footage of the building wasn't a good use.
That wasn't a comment.
Right. So in any case, me as the planner, I said I don't think that fits in the table like it did on some of these other previous projects, and so you know that's why we kind of used this accessory use and then the administrative interpretation based on having the applicant show us some examples to get to that adequate number. And again, we think that this is plenty of off-street parking. We wouldn't want to have told them, no, you have to make your parking lot bigger. We think the on-street parking and the fact that, you know, the neighborhood can, you know, there's a lot of people that will walk here throughout the neighborhood. We thought that was plenty, but the code is a little bit awkward sometimes, and it was less awkward for some of those past projects to use that table just because the buildings were bigger.
And Troy, if I can add on to that, I don't quite remember the name of that category either. I think it was some words and outdoor recreation. So it was something longer than that. Yes, but we did look at that standard that was used on those previous projects as well, and the parking that we're proposing exceeds, if we were to apply those same standards, the parking we're proposing exceeds those numbers as well.
That's good. So, Kristen, I put you on the spot here, hearing my rather long-winded
Sure.
Manifesto, if you will, here. But you have been good at it. Any thoughts on addressing this? And I mean, this is our premier northern residence, and you know, I was very impressed with what was done with the roads out there. That's when I first met Jim, and very impressed with that phase of it. Any thoughts on what you heard from us, and in particular from me?
Yeah, well, I mean, first I want to say I've been taking notes on what everyone has been saying, so I am making sure that I'm documenting this, and my team is the next call after this meeting as well, so they will hear all of the comments that you've made as well. So, I mean, it is tricky, right? There's a lot of components to it. So one idea that I have, you know, we have for other projects in the past put together, it's fairly simple, but essentially a maintenance memo that we can provide to, you know, we can provide it to the developer, the Metro District, they can provide it to their landscape crews that has some of these like best practices, general rules, expectations for maintenance of these areas. So that's something we could certainly put together specifically for this project, and you know, we can provide it to the town to take a look at as well, but then make sure that the Metro District and then whoever they're using for maintenance is receiving that as well. You know, I always like to caution, we're still not at the very end of the line of the folks that are going out to do this maintenance. But my hope is if there's some more written documentation, something that we can be referring them back to, saying, hey, are you guys following these guidelines that we provided? In conjunction with talking with the ownership group as well and making sure that they're aware of the concerns that the community has, that we can address some of these issues. But certainly happy to talk about other ideas as well.
You said you have 4 other projects that'll be coming before us? No, that's a question. Will those be coming before us? You'll see where I'm going with this in a moment.
Oh, you mean at Kitchell?
Yeah.
There will be projects for the future parks that come before you as well. So it's a good time to follow up as well and see how things are going.
You can, if you look closely at the agenda, you can see we added a number 6 updates here. And that's for a number of things, but one of which is just what it sounds like, to follow up on things. So I certainly something, and I say this with a smile on my face, if you come before us again on something else, certainly on that list will be, let's circle back to where we are with the issues that came up on February 3rd.
Yep, you bet.
Commissioners, anything else on that? Staff, any further thoughts? Okay. Yeah, with the understanding that certainly these other things will be addressed, certainly would not want to not advance this project. So residents have waited long enough for something, and ultimately, I think this will turn out to be a nice project. There's open space, and I'm glad to hear there's other parks on other side around the lake that are yet to come. What's the one thing we didn't ask? When are you starting on this, and when will it be finished?
I think their intention is to start on it soon. I think they wanted to try and have the pool ready for next summer. I don't know that 100%, but I know they've been asking me really regularly, how soon will we go to hear about an approval on this? We want to get started on construction. So I can follow up and get that information to you as well. But I think the intent is to get started as soon as construction makes sense in terms of the timeline of the seasons, so that they can get the facility open.
Next summer being 2027.
I don't know how fast they could build this. Have you heard anything on the timeline?
All right,
I think they're targeting summer. I just don't know how soon.
Okay, yeah, when you said next summer, I didn't know if you meant the coming summer, or I'm just curious when, I know, just curious when you would have this done.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be this summer or next
Okay,
summer,
all
but
right.
I will
I
get some information
so.
on that. I think my message is I think they were trying to get it built and available to the community as soon as possible.
Commissioners, anything else? Any other questions? Okay. With that, do I have a motion on business item 7A, the Kitchell Lake Clubhouse?
I move to recommend approval of the Kitchell Lake Clubhouse Development Site Plan, Track D, Saratoga Falls, third filing, as noted.
A second? It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Advances on a 4-0 vote. Thank you. Move on to Section 8. We also have public hearing on these land use code amendments, assuming anybody's here to offer those comments. And this is Scott.
Commissioners, yes, I have a few land use code amendments I'd like to talk about tonight. We're going to look at food trucks, temporary use, outdoor lighting, bike lanes, accessory dwelling unit setbacks. Food truck vendor. Okay, this looks complicated, but it's not. This really kind of originated from our events team and how the town hosts a number of events, and they often invite food truck vendors to those processes. Currently in our code, food truck vendors are regulated, They're only allowed in mixed use in commercial districts, but not residential districts. There is an exemption for food trucks that just sell novelty items like ice cream. So when you start getting into enforcement, it gets very tricky. The land use code technically doesn't regulate rights of way. This is where a lot of the food trucks conduct their business. So I'm trying to update the code to make that consistent with land uses versus what's happening on the street. So municipal code section 10-3-60 actually even allows vending to occur in a street within a 15-minute period. Again, kind of going to the idea of food trucks visiting construction sites, ice cream trucks and other things. Again, these are on the streets, not on the land use code. So this amendment is looking to clean up a little bit of that confusion in the land use code versus how it's being practiced. A lot of the things listed in the land use code are actually licensing requirements for insurance, health insurance, or not health, motor insurance, health inspection, fire inspection, etc. Those are being moved to a more administrative function with a permit application and a business license to make sure that they do have the necessary requirements. They do have a business license so that the town is collecting sales tax revenue. Also, there is a House bill that was adopted that allows for I can't even say it. We acknowledge the other permits from other towns. So if somebody gets a
Reciprocity.
thank you, my tongue got really tied up there. That they, if they get a food truck permit from another community, then it's eligible here. So this is moving all that out of our land use code and moving into our business license and permitting process. To further complicate a very simple topic is temporary use. So if you, again, think of food trucks and where they happen at a town event, which if that's the case, either the town or an entity has to apply for a special use permit. And that's, again, where that would be done through a permitting process and not done through a zoning or land use application. The other possibility would be through a temporary use, so things like Christmas tree sales or what have you, but it wasn't clear how food trucks fit in there, so I wanted to clean that up to make it clear that food truck vending is not a temporary use. So oftentimes you'll see food trucks that operate at the Timnath Beer Works and sometimes other businesses. So those are on private property. They have the permission from the business to operate there. Again, they will still have to have a valid food truck vending business license and permit, but that's not a temporary use. So they're very short duration. They come infrequently depending on the day of the week. Typically temporary uses are limited to 30 days. They're usually for special events for like a sales or a arts fair or other sorts of things. So I wanted to clarify that food trucks are not going to be within temporary use. And while I was looking at temporary uses, I noticed a few opportunities to clean up code. Most importantly, the way it's written right now is mostly for farmers markets. But if you look at our municipal code, it actually talks about running races and arts fairs and other things. So this is, again, to make our two codes consistent, municipal code and land use code. So the temporary use could actually be an arts fair and those sorts of things that could happen on a property. Also mentions tobacco, which I'm not sure why we would allow tobacco sales in a special use situation, so I just took that out. It was just very confusing language in there. So that's the overview of food truck vendor. A lot of kind of conflicting messages with the municipal code and land use code, and this is just to clean up the land use code to be consistent with the municipal code and how we practice our permitting and processing for food trucks. The next item is looking at outdoor lighting. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
You want to ask questions as I go through this? I'm happy to do it
I'm
that
going
way.
to ask my colleagues, do you want to, it might be better if
Yeah.
Scott's okay, it might be better to do as we go along. Okay, let's, okay, let's do that as we go along, if that's okay. Renzo?
Yeah, with regards to the food truck, I had several questions. One of the things I saw that when you, in your text, you address signage, and that signage can't be out. But what about the tables and outdoor chairs that sometimes the food trucks put?
We could certainly add that in there. Generally, again, the land use, that we look at sign permits and there's confusion about sign permits on what signage is. So I just wanted to keep that kind of a little bit in the food truck so that if a food truck vendor shows up on a private property and just starts throwing their signage out everywhere, I want to make sure that they're kind of keep them in control a little bit with the administrative side, that we can certainly add that into the application, that they cannot block ADA entrances and ramps like I had with the signage. Oftentimes private property owners, again, that's something that they work with their food truck vendors, so I'm sure they're looking out for their best interests, that they're not putting tables out and blocking parking spaces and other things. So I tend to trust that agreement between the property owner and the food truck vendor would take place, and I don't think it's necessary to necessarily put it in code.
And then I think you addressed it, but I was kind of didn't leap out at me. We have a lot of food trucks going into this construction zones, to feed the workers. It looked like that would be prevented by that, but yet when you spoke, you made it clear that they're still going to be allowed in construction.
Yeah, so in the table, right now it shows that food trucks aren't allowed in residential districts. I'm changing it to be permitted in all districts. Now remember, that's on private property. The municipal code talks about vending on the streets. That's what you're getting with the ice cream trucks or the food truck vendors going to construction sites. They're pulling up on a construction site in the street. The workers come out, grab their snacks, and they pull away, and they have 15 minutes to do that. So long as they have a business license and a food truck permit, they're good to go. They don't need a special use permit. They don't need a temporary use. Sometimes residents have parties, graduation parties or whatever, and they can hire a food truck. They could do that. It would be permitted if they pulled that food truck in their driveway and they did that. If it was blocking the street, that could seem to be a different issue, the 15-minute thing. But that's where the land use code would come in and kind of regulate that kind of aspect. If somebody, again, a private person invited a food truck for a party, and that's how it would allow it. But typically that wouldn't be allowed right now as the code is written.
And then my last question, because it looked like when I was reading through it, the food trucks had to have a lot of licenses or permits to be able to operate. And I believe you alluded, if they already have it in one other city, we'll accept it per the new state ruling. What, in a nutshell, a food truck requires a business license to operate in Timnath, which can be one that they obtain anywhere, and then only if they're doing one of those other areas that they need a special permit, or is it just the licenses?
Bare minimum, they would need a business license. That's just to make sure that we're collecting our sales tax. And then the reciprocity requirement, they could either get through Timnath or another agency, and they would just demonstrate that they have their food truck permit. That's all they would need to do.
Oh, those are definitely two distinct things.
Those are two separate things, but that's the bare minimum. So the state bill kind of helps eliminate the redundancy that, because food trucks often operate in different communities. So from my understanding, their perspective would be, I have to get a permit every different town I have to go to. If they got one from a different town, we would honor that, and that it's just validating that they have those other requirements.
Other commissioners? No? Tom? Okay. What if I say permanent, what does permanent food truck mean to you? That's not a trick question. Somebody asked me, does this apply to permanent food trucks? And I didn't.
Well, I think the definition, I don't have it pulled up, but they're meant to be a mobile temporary, vendor. A permanent, I can't think of any in Timnath per se, but if there was a truck that was located at a business in a spot that never moved, then that would be something that would probably have to start looking at either a temporary use or again, looking at their permit to make sure that they have a valid permit to
But
vend.
everything would apply, still apply to them
Yeah.
if they're there. Okay.
And again, these permits generally we're looking to be good for annually, so they'd only have to do it once a year.
Yeah, I have no problem. Anybody who doesn't understand how complicated what you all do is, only has to see this just for food trucks.
I mean, to be honest, this is what we're practicing. We're just trying to make our code reflect what we're practicing, so that's.
The only comment I have, and you know, you in particular and the whole staff, I was very supportive of bringing the enforcement under you all. Certainly, it is, am I correct, though, most of this is reactive, complaint-based, as opposed, you're not at the point, and getting to that, even getting to the point, it's a sensitive matter, being more proactive in going out and looking for things. Do you anticipate, though, staffing, when staffing is available, to become more proactive in enforcement?
Well, in regards to food trucks, it would be a reactive thing. Again, with the permitting and licensing, it should take care of itself. Generally, enforcement majority would be more reactive, complaint-based. There are some things on the proactive sides that, when you're looking at new construction, for example, when we're getting into stormwater control, looking at keeping the streets clear, those sorts of things are more of an educational, proactive approach that the enforcement will be looking at, making sure that as those projects are being developed, they're kind of keeping the streets clean, keeping the sites and the trash in place. But yeah.
Anything else? All right, food trucks. We'll vote on this all as a package. Moving on.
So outdoor lighting, again, this holiday season, I got some questions from Marty and I think some others when we approved the dark skylights. The town actually pushed out some social media about the holiday season lights, and we got some colorful feedback from some community members about that. So one of this is really kind of trying to address a little bit of some of the challenges in regards to enforcement. So under the lighting standards, design standards, there's some prohibited lighting, and I just wanted to remove chase lighting. Staff has had some challenges interpreting what chase lighting is and how does it apply. So I have some lovely images on the slide showing some examples of holiday lights, maybe a building that's gone a little bit too crazy on some chase lighting and what have you. And then the other one has some landscaping and possibly security lighting. So all of us have seen different forms of this lighting around town, including town hall, the PD department has this type of lighting. So I wanted to clarify that this low voltage lighting is not prohibited, because it's challenging to interpret what would be allowed and not allowed. And then I wanted to take out the section describing linear lamps, which is a lot of the lighting that we're talking about here, and put that within the confines of design standards, so that we are defining what is allowed as this chase lighting for either security or holiday lighting. It's low voltage, it still has to fall within the low voltage, still within light trespass, so that this type of lighting can be used in regards to that. So it's, again, a little bit of a cleanup. There were some challenges in interpretation with some permits that we've been reviewing and in regards to complaints.
Are these chase, I'm not familiar with the expression, these are examples of chase lighting, this lighting that's on these two houses, the top and the
Well,
bottom?
the chase lighting, can refer to a vehicle or any kind of chase, but generally it's lighting that would be in an architectural context under the within the eave or the gutter line or the soffit of a building. Sometimes it's been used in regards to like a carnival where you have the lights blinking and whatever, which again, we don't allow for the flashing, blinking lights except for the holiday period. So again, the terminology chase lighting is a little confusing on what does it define and what it includes, so that's why that term was eliminated with that.
So perhaps it's because, unfortunately, I've been head of our HOA for 16 years now, because nobody else will do it. I get sought out, including my colleague who's not here tonight on the left, who's now involved out at Wild Wing, and as is Commissioner Lowry was involved with his separate HOA. HOAs seem to have the most involvement of complaints about what you're calling chase lighting. I just got to ask this, are you removing this as prohibited because it's just it's impossible to enforce? You said there's an interpretation on a case-by-case basis, and don't read too much into this, but are we just kind of giving up on this?
Well,
And I kind of got to know, because my own HOA.
I'll be honest. So the term chase lighting is not very clear. It's not very well defined. You get different results when you're looking at it. We're looking at it from an architectural aesthetic standpoint. In regards to an enforcement, there is some conflict between the code when you look at holiday lighting versus chase lighting, and then you get into security lighting and landscape lighting, and what's allowed and what isn't. So there's a lot of interpretation of what one might see chase lighting as security lighting or landscape lighting that might be within the provisions that it's down lighting and it's shining on the building, and it's not necessarily chase lighting, right? So there are challenges with that, and then yes, to enforce that provision where somebody might have that as a pre-existing light and saying, hey, this isn't with town code, except for during the holidays, it would be very difficult to interpret and challenge or enforce the strict interpretation of chase lighting. Haven't given up. Again, this is it's moving it within the design standards so that it's keeping it low voltage, more in the intent of what it's supposed to be doing, and we still have light trespass. It's not going to be shining into the neighbors and other things. So there are some protections to make sure that it's just not going to turn into the Christmas Vacation, Walt Griswold, somebody just lighting up their whole house. I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to prevent here.
We hear the most about the car wash.
Yes,
is
we
that
do.
chase lighting, and is that acceptable?
Well, we hear a lot about it, but I haven't actually received an official complaint. I mean, I've worked with our folks here at Town Hall and PD to make sure that our architectural lighting is consistent with our code. These are all programmable. Oftentimes you can program them so that, I've seen people change them to the Broncos colors when they were in the playoffs, and then it's whatever holiday you're going to change it to. They can blink, and then they can do whatever. So working with staff here at the town to make sure that we're following our own rules about blinking and flashing, and we're actually turning them off earlier in the evening. I think they used to run all night long. So that's just partly an educational thing, and certainly something I can reach out to the car wash on.
And I don't care about the car, I'll go on record, the car wash is fine with me. We hear about it a lot.
Again, I've heard people talk about it, but not anybody specifically.
Yeah, I like the car wash. Renzo?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm confused on your discussions. And the reason why I'm kind of confused is when I look at paragraph 5.3.3.3, it's entitled prohibited lighting.
Yeah,
In
that's
the paragraph that you're addressing about low voltage dimmable programming, blah, 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 it makes it sound like that's prohibitable or prohibited. not acceptable like you guys are talking.
So it's currently in the prohibited section. I'm moving it out of the prohibited section to a new section under design standards 5.3.31 F5.
Okay, I misunderstood that.
Yeah, I'm
that
sorry.
number.
It's basically I'm taking some of the language that was in the prohibited and moving it to,
I'm good now.
Yeah.
Now
it is confusing and yeah.
All right, the next bike lanes.
Yeah, I just want to
Oh,
mention,
go ahead.
Scott, that I think it's great what you're doing. I think to any extent you can push this back on the HOAs and try to get them to enforce it rather than have the town get stuck with this. I'd encourage you to try to do that. It may take meetings with HOA boards in order to get them to actually do stuff, but really this shouldn't be the town's problem. It should be the HOA's problem. And I sit on a board too, so I know what it's like, Phil.
Well, I'm going to
Well,
take that as authority now. I'm just going to say, hey, I heard planning commission
That's
gave
my
us the
opinion.
authority.
You know, and I'm not on an HOA board, nor I intend to be on one, but I think it's always convenient to be like, hey, this is the town standard and, you know, we should do it. You know, blame us.
Make them enforce it and those kinds of
Yeah.
things. And I do think that commercial lighting, you might consider, just like with food trucks, maybe that falls into the permitting process. If you're going to have lights on your commercial building, maybe you should apply for a permit in order to have them.
So there are some lighting standards with sign permits and awnings and things, so we do kind of cover that in some other areas of the code. Yeah.
It would be a way to pull it out of the code and throw it into a permit and let somebody else mess with it. Sorry, Phil.
That's, works. Okay, bike lanes.
Actually, sorry, the slide deck I have is accessory
Okay.
dwelling units.
Sure.
This was really kind of making sure that our current standards are in alignment with the state bill regarding accessory dwelling units. So the state law prohibits requiring ADU rear setbacks larger and greater than what's on the slide, also 5 feet. So the amendment's just kind of taking care of consistency with the state law.
This is cleanup.
It's just
the
clean up.
rear ADU.
Yep.
Everybody got that?
Yeah, this is
Okay.
probably the biggest thing that the Board of Adjustment for the county gets tied up in. There's a lot of pre-existing non-conforming
How's it going for you?
uses. Well,
Appreciate your service.
Okay, now bike lanes.
Now, bike lanes. Again, this is just purely a cleanup issue. Maybe Director Stone can mention a little bit about it, but typically, when we're looking at the Larimer County urban area street standards, we adopted those using the Loveland standard. This is just to avoid any inconsistencies with the Lucas standards versus what we have in the land use code. So it's just removing that 8-foot wide requirement and deferring to what's in the Lucas standards, street standards.
something to think about. We talked a little bit about pools tonight. Each of the pools in the town that have street parking, all of those street parkings happen to be bike lanes that they're parking in. So summer times when the pools are full, you can't drive your bike down that side of the road. It happens at Summerfield Parkway, it happens over by the Peanut by Bethke, and I'm sure it's gonna happen at this new pool that they've got proposed here tonight. So I think that we need to think about, are we doing ourselves a disservice by putting a bike lane along a street where public parking is gonna happen, in the summertime for pools?
Yeah, and I think right now we're Public Works is pushing out some information about an ordinance about wheels go where, and I think that kind of addresses that topic about, you know, golf carts and bicycles going in the bike lanes and not parking in the bike lane. Technically, a vehicle's not supposed to park in the bike lane, but that's more of an enforcement issue. But
It's alongside of a pool, everybody's gonna park in the bike lane. It happens when there's events over at the elementary school, everybody parks in the bike lane. And you're forcing bikes out into the middle of the street at the worst possible time when kids are running in between cars and there's a lot more traffic in, 4th of July at the swimming pool. So it's something we need to think about. Maybe the bike lane should be on the other side of the street to start with.
Again, this is why this is taking it out of the land use code and putting it into the Lucas standards so that Public Works can administer the best practices for those pavement markings and where bike lanes should go.
Yeah, and
Justin.
that sort of thing is, it's a lot more detailed when you get into, because it's based on the classification of the streets and where we could look at different streets, different uses, different parking. So it's a little easier to address that, so.
We do have, I'm a cyclist, for instance, Trailside. Is that Trailside's the east-west? Many of our, what you call arterial streets, I think have the bike lane and the parking, they're wide enough. There are places certainly where that happens, but.
Parked cars take
but
over the bike lane and
places-
bikes are forced out in the middle of the street or on the sidewalk.
But many of our bigger, wider streets have both, room for both bike lane, then there's the parking.
Correct, that's why we could look at it on a site-specific area and in specific road classification, like you said.
Yep.
Or we could look at if it's usually it's typically your arterials and your collectors, local streets, it's low volume, low speed, low volume of cars. So basically the bicyclists can share with the car, but then once you get in the collectors, that's when you start separating them, providing separation. And then like you had mentioned too, is if we're looking at parking, we would have a road section that would include, and Lucas does talk about that, if you have parking, then bike lanes, and then the travel lanes. We definitely look at that, so.
I don't believe that Pritchard Street, where we have this new pool proposed, is going to be wide enough. Not an arterial.
And you're talking about the one you just looked at?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like from the drawings that were showing up there that there was either a local street or a minor collector, but nothing above that, especially when you look at, if you see driveways, Lucas requires that major collectors don't have driveways on them, just because of the volume of the traffic and also just the safety concerns that you have, faster speeds and more cars driving in a neighborhood. So that's why the classification breaks between a major collector, minor collector, and a local street. So it looked like from the plans that I saw, and I didn't do the review, but those looked like they were either a local street or a minor collector.
I think they're all local.
So there would be no bike lanes on those streets. So you wouldn't have that issue. There is room for parking. All of our standards for local streets does do the parking on the sides. It's just when you get to like a lane classification.
Thank you.
Oh, we almost made it. Does this apply only to new street? We won't be having to change the width of existing bike lane or change anything, or do we?
Yeah, as far as part of our program, when we do resurfacing, we do look at that as far as potential, like we did on some roads, where we could do more bike lanes or buffered bike lanes. But with the development review, we look at those, moving forward per standards. I can't talk about what was like maybe approved in the past. Maybe, I don't know when the town adopted the Larimer County Urban Area Street Standards, but moving forward, they would govern those standards, so they would be built. And Lucas is based upon like the 20-year design life of the roads. Like I said, we could always go back and look at what's called a road diet. I don't know, there's another term nowadays, especially if roads were maybe overbuilt, that maybe we projected traffic that was gonna be a lot higher than it really comes to be. So then we could go and maybe repurpose the lanes a little bit more for bikes and stuff like that, since we don't need the extra width for the travel lanes. Or like a 4-lane arterial, which we don't maybe need. That could be a whole other topic of discussion, so.
Yes. Yeah, I think it'd be the other way. I don't think they're overbuilt, they're underbuilt, and it's hard to make them wider.
Well, we only have to go places where there are no bike lanes at all to appreciate what we have. And as Commissioner Jost would say, don't let perfect get in the way of better. So we're pretty darn good. and our trail is almost done. Renzo, you get something else?
And I applaud you for pointing out the standard versus putting the text in here, but when I read the standard versus the text here, this said 8-foot wide designations, and I believe the standard only has 5 foot. Does that cause any kind of issue? And the standards seem to address a lot of Fort Collins specific areas versus just Larimer County-wide, so.
Yeah, again, we're just trying to be consistent with the street standards that we adopted, so.
That's not gonna be an issue with us.
No, I think that's better. Once you get to 8 feet, that's pretty wide. That's when people start thinking it's another travel lane. Or then if it's on the side of the street, people will, because that's about the size of a parking lane, they get confused and think it's not a bike lane, it's a parking lane. So that must have been an old standard. Not even Fort Collins, I think their widest is like 6 feet. Loveland's are 5 feet, so for bike lanes typically.
Can you educate me a little bit how that's measured? Because when I look at a bike lane, it might be only about 2 feet wide. Are you talking about 5 feet to include away from the curb? How's that measured?
Yeah, so you look at the asphalt pavement, so it's 5 feet. Sometimes you'll have curb and gutter that's 2, so then that extra 2 feet would make it like 7. But again, you don't want the bicyclist to ride in the curb line. So it's the pavement would be like the shoulder pavement is 5 feet wide, is the bike lane. So it's the asphalt part. It's not the concrete curb part.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Scott, anything else on these? Commissioners, anything else? Thank you for those, okay, recommendations. All right, with that, do I have a motion on item 8A, the land use code amendments as presented by Community Development Director Robinson?
Motion to approve the changes to the land use code.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the land use code amendments. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries on a 4-0 vote. Very good. The only thing I have under reports is the staff has made it known that they're going to be more actively tracking absences as per our excessive absence policy. We've got a new year here, so everybody's starting with a fresh slate here. So just be aware of that as we have 3 seats vacant here tonight. But I'll certainly bring this up the next time. All hands are on deck as well. So, Commissioners, anything else to report or question?
Thank you for the shirts.
Okay, well, the staff, that would be the event and rec staff, Callie Hoppy, but better late than never. So we will be meeting, I understand, 2 weeks hence. Okay, and that you want to share what we know will be on that agenda, or you don't have to?
So we're doing a master sign program.
There's going to be 2 Ladera applications. One is their ED overlay. They currently have a north one and a south one, and they're trying to just combine them into one document. And the second one is the final plat for Ladera as well. So you'll be seeing those on the 17th.
I thought I saw them cleaning up the asphalt plant site. Is that?
Yeah, they're regrading all the
Well, I saw
landscape.
that too.
It completely went away, didn't it?
They were grading where the
Yeah.
approval on the third filing is just south of Florida and Decor. I
Yes.
noticed that.
But if I can ask, is Prost Brewing still in process?
I'm not aware of, they're not in process, but
They're
still interested, I think.
yeah, the marketing drawings that Ladera is circulating is showing them in a different location than when they came to conceptual, further to the south, adjacent to kind of that north end of the south reservoir. So probably in a phase in a couple years, it sounds like.
Okay. Commissioners, anything else? staff? Anybody? Okay,
Building permits, are they still lagging behind?
So for the year, end of year 25, we were probably down by about 100 maybe. But we've picked up others like with additions and basement finishes, so those were up a little bit more. Off this year, we've probably had a little bit of uptick just off of some commercial, but not too worried to get panicked just yet. But yeah, it's a little bit slow right now.
Thank you.
okay. Anybody else? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Good job.